Antonio Lopez incorporated the changing attitude of women into his work. As women became more liberated in the 60s, the models in his work became more carefree and active, as seen in this piece he did for the Fashion of the Times in 1966. From British Vogue 1965, Antonio captures the restless, easy rider feeling of the 1960s. It was very different to see fashion illustration in this context. This is also a great example of how Antonio was able to illustrate objects such as a motorcycle with the same ease as a fashion figure. Antonio also referenced a new art form called psychedelic in Fashion of the Times in 1967 that predated Richard Avedon's famous use of it by almost a year. Antonio was one of the first to mix many different mediums into his work. Here is a photograph of model Susan Barrett's hugging an illustration of herself for the cover of French Elle in 1967. Antonio and his partner Juan Ramos are pictured here in 1972. Their dandy style helped make them international fashion superstars. Antonio and Juan became very good friends with Karl Lagerfeld in Paris, then the designer behind the successful ready-to-wear line Chloe. Together, they, along with an entourage of fabulous models and it personalities, became highly visible in the European fashion scene. Antonio's studio was down the block from Paragon's sporting goods store. He was very influenced by the gear sold there and used them as props in his photographs, such as this one of Pat Cleveland wrapped in a sleeping bag. This in turn influenced many designers, such as Norma Kamali, who is said to have been inspired to create her sleeping bag coat after seeing this image. Antonio was known to incorporate street culture, which he saw on the streets of New York City. In the early 1980s, he started to hang out with young breakdancers, which he would see on the streets, and as you can see from this illustration from GQ in 1984, he used the dance style to illustrate high fashion. Antonio referenced sex unabashedly. In his work, and even in this simple piece for Italian Vogue 1982, he cannot help but inject some sex into a simple drawing of a white cable knit sweater. The tattooed forearm was also an element not often seen at this time. Antonio would discover many models, and many of the girls that he worked with, such as Jessica Lange, Grace Jones, and Jerry Hall, would go on to become some of the world's most famous entertainers. Antonio Lopez was such a force in the fashion and art worlds. We hope that our book, Antonio Lopez, Fashion Art, Sex and Disco, will continue to inspire generations to come.